everyone. Welcome to this webinar, The Art of the Open Studio, Best Practices for Showcasing Your Studio and Artwork. While we wait for everyone to join, please introduce yourself in the chat. Maybe your name, where you're logging in from, what type of art you make. Also, whether you're an Artwork Archive subscriber or not, we'd love to meet you all. So quick tip with that too, if you want to make sure that everyone can see what you're saying in the chat, make sure to send to everyone because it'll default to host and panelist. And while selfishly, we love seeing it as well. It's really great so that everyone can see who's in the chat, where you're logging in from. So go ahead and introduce yourself. We'll go ahead and read through some of those. So we've got Carolyn from Honolulu, Hawaii. Amazing. Hi, Jules, Berkeley, California. Painter from Charlotte, North Carolina. Hello, Jonathan. Oh, it's so great to see you all. From Memphis, Tennessee. Hi, Matthew. I was born in Memphis, Tennessee, so it's always great to see a fellow Tennessean. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen as well.
Read them.
I know they're going so fast. Hopefully everyone can see this screen once I start sharing. And then I'm also going to pin all of us so that you can see everyone. And if you have an issue with seeing the screen or seeing the speakers as well, you can adjust your view in Zoom up at the top right. You should be able to adjust gallery view, speaker view, whatever works for you. But just let us know if you're having an issue seeing the screen or seeing the speakers, because we want everyone to be able to feel like this is a conversation. And while everyone is introducing themselves, I'm going to go through some housekeeping items real fast. So yes, we are recording. We will send the recording out in the follow-up email so you can watch it. If anything goes quickly or you want to revisit something we talk about, that is available to you. To access captions, you can click the show captions in the bottom of your Zoom menu. If you're on an iPad, you might have to click the little 3 dots to show your options. We also are going to be having a Q&A session at the end. So for Q&A questions, submit those in the Q&A box. The chat is for introductions, technical support, also any tips or comments that you want to share with the general audience. The Q&A section will guide us in the Q&As at the end. So make sure that if you want to get your question answered, or if you want to make sure that anything you share gets seen by the panelists, please make sure that you submit those in the Q&A, because sometimes they get lost in the chat. And then also, if you need any other questions answered after the webinar, you can always reach out to us at team@artworkarchive.com. You can also contact us via chat on artworkarchive.com as well. So we have this little chat icon in the bottom right that pops up. Send us a message. We really love hearing from you. So you can always access us there. And then let's see. Gosh, I'm just loving seeing these file in. I'm also going to introduce our panel here. So first up, we have Nancy Murphy Spicer. She is an incredible artist and artist coach, has exhibited work at galleries and museums in the US and in Europe. Her work has been reviewed and highlighted in Sculpture Magazine, Art New England, Tagesspiegel, Berlin, and Art Papers. The Boston Globe has twice named her exhibitions among the top 10 shows in Boston. Nancy Murphy Spicer currently teaches online for the School of the Art Institute of Chicago and has taught at Virginia Commonwealth University, the University of the West of England. She completed a mid-career MFA at the Art Institute of Chicago with an exhibition of paintings and a written thesis entitled The New Bragg, Erasure and Co-Constitution of Self. Paintings from the New Bragg series were included in New American Paintings MFA Annual Volume 141. Her essay on the work of Cy Twombly is included in a book accompanying the Art Institute of Chicago exhibition entitled Material Meanings, Selections from the Constance R. Kaplan Collection. She's also a certified professional co-active coach with 12 years of experience working with women artists and entrepreneurs to develop their most authentic work and share it with the world. I actually had the pleasure of working with Nancy as a coach for my own studio practice, and I can honestly say that it was life-changing for me. So highly recommend reaching out to her if that's something that you're interested in, because I know her courses have helped so many creatives. So welcome, Nancy, if you have any words you want to say.
Thank you so much. I'm thrilled to be here because appreciate Cassidy's invitation, and also I'm a huge fan of Artwork Archive. I teach it in all of my classes. So I offer one-to-one coaching, and I'm also just about to launch a new course called Build Your Studio Practice in January. So if you want more information about that, you can go to my website, Murphy Spicer Artist Coach, and yeah, this is just such an important topic, and I have been in many open studios, and it's really changed my career a lot as an artist to be part of open studios and to prepare for them in a mindful way. So I'm excited about this conversation.
I'm so excited you're here. Next up also is Amari Booker. So Amari is a visual artist based in Nashville, Tennessee and Los Angeles. He began his journey as an artist his senior year of high school at Montgomery Bell Academy while attending Belmont University. Omari also studied mathematics and other more traditional curricula before he finally focused on studio art. And we're so glad he did, and graphic design. He later earned his BS in graphic design from Tennessee State University. Oil paintings are Omari's predominant medium, but mixed media, including charcoal, ink, and found objects, are essential building blocks of his work and are used to create finished pieces. Large-scale work has been a constant creative outlet for Omari, and murals have also become a consistent part of his creative practice. So Omari takes a process-oriented approach to his art, embracing it as a therapeutic modality through which he can express his passion for the freedom and independence that the creative process allows him to experience. His art is his personal therapy, and his desire is that those viewing it will have personal experiences of catharsis. The philosophy that undergirds Omari's work is freedom through art, and he aspires to create work that communicates to his audience their unique and intrinsic ability to be free. Welcome, Omari. Do you have anything you want to say in the beginning?
Yeah, well, thank you. Thank you, Cassidy, for having me, and Artwork Archive for having me, and Nancy. I'm excited about this conversation, and yeah, that pretty much that's a good helicopter view of what I'm up to. I think that open studios are extremely important, and especially as my practice is focused in liberation and having some agency in what you do and how you share your work. I think being able to use your studio as a launch point is a really important part of having that ownership of how you share and sell your work, and even in building your own yeah, kind of building the work that you're making. So when you do decide to work with galleries or museums or whatever institutions, you already have your own some of your own agency. So yeah, I'm excited about it.
Yes.
Yes. Yeah, we'll talk a lot about agency. That word, I feel like, is something that was new to me, is exploring open studios. And then a quick intro to anyone who is brand new to Artwork Archive. If you're like, I subscribe to this newsletter, I had no idea it was also in our inventory platform. Just gonna do a run through. We began in 2010 as one of the first cloud-based art inventory systems, provide artists with tools to manage their art inventory, grow their careers. We're accessible for artists at any stage of their career. So we have, early stage artists all the way to more established professional artists who have been working for decades. You can save time on administrative work and taxes by having an online platform and an organized system. We help enable quickly sharing work with potential buyers. Also helps, with professional credibility when you're dealing with galleries and curators. And we're serving users in over 160 countries. So that's a little bit high level view about us. For those who are Artwork Archive subscribers, I'm going to also, with each stage that we're going through the conversation today, I'll share specific ways that you can use your Artwork Archive account and different tools inside of it so that it can benefit, your process during an open studio. So there's something here for everyone. And then here's a quick overview of what we're going to talk about today. So we're going to walk through questions to ask yourself before hosting an open studio. We're going to define what is an open studio. If a lot of you are like, it can mean so many things, and it can. So we're going to walk through the different versions. Then we'll go through some tips for the planning, prepping, hosting, post-event process, and we'll end with a Q&A section. So if you have any comments, general thoughts, advice to other artists, please share. And then we have some from a questionnaire that we sent out, but I'd love to hear from all of you who showed up today. Okay, so let's dive in. I just want to make sure, Katie and everyone, if you can see these slides. Okay, it looks like everyone can. All right. There's an issue. Okay. So what is an open studio? My loose definition was, an event where artists open up their studio space to allow visitors, buyers, general public to view and potentially purchase their work. I wanted to open up to Nancy and Omari and talk about the different versions and which ones you guys have participated in, because I know there's, a private open studio where you're just inviting a couple collectors or one person at a time. There's a public open studio where maybe you're participating with your entire, you're in a group or a building with a bunch of other artists and strangers are coming into your space. There's also options for a virtual open studio or even a hybrid in-person virtual. So Nancy, I'll let you open up with what open studios have you participated in and what have you found to be most beneficial for your practice?
So it's been a range. So the most emphatic was when I was in Boston at Vernon Street Studios. Every year we had open studios, and it was an established open studio. So literally over 1,000 people would come through in 2 days. And so we all organized the building together. There were like 100 artists, and we worked together. There were like committees, different people were doing signage. We hired police officers to make sure everybody was safe. It got to be a kind of like families would plan on it. It was on Mother's Day weekend every year. So it was a really great thing for all of us as a community, and also for me individually. I found that almost every year something would happen. There'd be like a new collector or a curator or a gallerist would come through. So there was almost always something kind of emphatic that happened for my art career as a result. Plus it was the one time of year when all the artists kind of connected. We had like pizza and quick walkthroughs the night before. So you just got to lay eyes on all your colleagues and see what they were doing.
Yes. Omari, have you had a similar experience? Or I know that you show a lot because you have a home studio.
I do. And so I have had a little bit of both, where I've kind of had, home studio where people come to my home and sort of walk through, and I do some kind of specific RSVPs, so I don't have my home address all over the, the the world. But I've also been a part of groups, kind of group studio, open studios where sometimes I didn't even have a studio in that building, but there was a space where I could display some artwork amongst the other studios. And then I've also had them when I did have a studio in a building, and open up the studio door and kind of create almost like a hybrid of a gallery slash workspace where I'm in my studio right now, and I don't necessarily, if I was having an open studio, there would definitely be some cleaning involved and some ways to make it feel a lot more inviting than it might when it's strictly for working. So I think that's something that we'll get into, but I've been a part of both.
Yeah. And then also I wanted to touch on, Nancy, you've done a lot of virtual experiences in your studio and other artists, right?
Yeah, well, I moved to England, and I was part of an art group in Boston with 4 other women, and we had been in this group for 5 years, so I wanted to continue to interact with them. So I had to figure out ways to have virtual studio visits with them so I could keep them up to date on my work, and that could involve videos or PDFs or actual like right in the moving the computer around so they could see the work. And then in my teaching, I lead groups like the group I was in. And so I haven't even met these women, but we have studio visits every month. and people take us through their work. And again, sometimes it's just images that they put up on the platform, and sometimes it's like, I need to take my computer over here and show you like this fiber work or whatever. And it's surprisingly intimate and effective.
I loved hearing that because I think that that opens up a whole new world for people. I feel like when you hear open studio, sometimes it feels really vulnerable. It feels, especially if you have a home studio, and it feels like you'll never get to kind of share or have that experience sharing your work. But with platforms like Zoom, you can actually, it opens it up for you, and you can have agency over what you show, how you show it. Um, I know that I'm going to move to our next slide because I know that this is what we talked about a lot, where before you do anything, it's really important to actually ask, what are your goals? What outcome are you hoping for? And then, Nancy, if you want to expand on the community, what's the community doing and why that's an important question to ask?
Yeah, I think it can be that as artists we can sometimes feel so needy, like I need for people to come and see my work. And if you are connected, hopefully you are connected to other artists, it can just make it much more powerful for the individual artists and the community if the artists are working together. So like in some of the studio buildings I've been in, we've had like silent auctions where people's work is in their studio but also in the hallways, so that people are bidding on it and getting to see it. Other things we've done is have like a curated exhibition in the hallway so that you can see 20 artists work and then say, oh, I want to go see that one, and that one. Um, and also that walkthrough the night before, so that during the open studios, we could say, oh, if you like this, if you're looking for more painting, you got to go to, Susan's studio, or, kind of recommend each other back and forth like that. It's like online hashtags, except in real life recommendations, because people will always ask you, whose work should I be sure to see? And, like help each other out, basically.
They do. I participated in Open Studio last year, and someone said, "Is there anyone that I shouldn't miss?" And I was brand new to the building, so I really didn't have a lot of answers to that. But I was like, "I know there's an artist 2 floors down that has really cool sculpture. Go check it out." But Amari, I also wanted to ask you, and both of you, when have you established goals where you think, yes, this is right for me to do an open studio? Or how have you gotten to the point where you're like, it's time for me to invite people in? Was there a point in which it wasn't?
Um, yeah, for me, I never really felt like there was a time where there wasn't, but there were times where there were really loud signs that there were. And I think a big part of it was whenever I felt like my studio was starting to close in on me, is almost like like your studio turns into an avalanche, and it's like I've got so much kind of work and stuff going on that I need a reset. I need to clear it out, and that can be a goal, is just to reset the space and clean out some work. And so, of course, you might have sales goals, and there's usually multiple goals that you have. But I think one of mine that I always accomplish is I get to see what work I even have, because the more you show work, I don't know a whole lot of artists that sell out every show. So every time I have a show, 40 to 70% of the work might be coming back to the studio. And so sometimes you need to do open studios just so you can see what you have and be able to share with people all this work that you still might feel really close to, but it doesn't quite fit with your new body of work or the next show that you're doing. So yeah, a lot of it is kind of a reset. That's a big way that I start to know that I need to do one, is that I'm looking around and it's like, okay, this room is getting smaller and smaller, and I need to get some space.
Yeah.
I
Nancy,
would
yeah,
say some possible goals might be A, I just want to sell work, or B, I don't care that much about selling work. I really want people to have an experience when they come into my studio. I really want them to see the work in progress and understand what my process is about. Um, Another thing can be, I really want to come out of this with a show or a gallery representation. So I'm going to do a bunch of stuff in the way I set it up, like Amari was saying, make it look like a gallery so they don't have to make a leap to see what your work is going to look like. And that can also mean what kind of preparation you do ahead of time to get those people in. And then it can also, I found that open studios is a really beautiful like community time, you know, where a lot of young artists come, so you can decide, you know, I love talking to those people and inspiring them, you know, and kids come through, and I mean, this might be the first time they see art in this kind of a setting. So there's a lot of things that can be going on, and so it's good to parse out what's important, you know, what's most important for your day, yeah, or weekend.
Yeah. You helped me with goals and when I was participating in my first one, because it was interesting where I didn't realize I did have goals. And I would have felt, if I hadn't set them beforehand or hadn't asked myself, you know, what do I actually want out of this? I probably would have felt a loose feeling of disappointment or a loose feeling of, did that go well? You know, but I had a goal of, I really want to meet new people. I want to make contacts, interesting contacts. And I was way more open at that point too, where I also wanted to show a new body of work and, you know, feel out what people, how they experienced it. And it was really vulnerable, but also with those goals at the end, I felt like that was a huge success. I'm so glad that that is what I went in thinking about and what I left with, because I feel like having an open-ended, like, here's my studio, come in, and then not really a clear understanding, you might miss people who are walking through, you might just miss out on a lot of opportunities. So I love the idea of asking yourself goals before.
I'm going to throw in one more example. I had a dear colleague that her work appeared simple, but actually the process was quite complex and took her a long time to make the work. So she had 1 year for Open Studios. She just had a kind of all the stages of a piece. And so she had like
Wow.
6 examples of, this is where it starts, this is 2 weeks in, this is a month in, this is 3 months in. So it just kind of opened her work up for people to really
Wow.
understand
That's a great way. I didn't think about also having unfinished paintings hanging.
it. Exactly.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be. Okay, we also, to everyone out there, I also recognize that we could go on and on and on for hours talking about this. So I'm going to be moving us along, but just know that we want to keep talking about it. And we'll, you know, produce more resources around this. But if I feel like a sergeant moving us along, I'm really sorry. I want to respect everyone's time. But we have different stages. This is how I kind of thought mentally we could plan this out, where we've got, you know, the planning stage of an open studio. Then you have the prepping, like getting your space ready, getting your mindset ready, and then the actual hosting, and then the post event. So we're going to go through each stage. And we kind of already talked about some of these stages, but planning stage. So there's a lot of words on these slides. We're going to send the slides out, have no fear, but picking some of these main planning points, what would you say are the ones that you make sure to have every single time? Or what do you think is the most important in the planning stage, Nancy and Omari?
Yeah, well, I can start on that one. I mean, for me, audience, you know, who I want to share it to and how I get that information out to them, and being really bold with sharing it. It's like trying to touch on all the different points where some people that do social media, you know, they'll only do social media, but they won't do email. Some people only do text. So if you have this group of people, you know, you might want to send every single person a text that you would want the flyer, then send everybody an email, and then post, but not just post like 2 days before, but this is an RSVP and a save the date and etc. So that's a really big part of what I do in planning, is how am I going to get, you know, people here that I want to be here. And then, like we talked about earlier, whether if it's galleries, you want to share that with gallerists and curators, etc. If it's, you know, potential buyers, but that's a big part of it. And then getting I think making the space ready. That's a big part of my planning too. And especially when I've done things that were sales oriented, making sure that everything is priced and clear, because it's people will kind of quickly like walk away from buying something if it's not clear how much it costs, and if they can tell that you're trying to decide how much it costs
Right.
as they ask to buy it. And so yeah, so the pricing, and I'll chat a little bit more about a few of the ways that I've kind of done that, where I have everything has a price, but because it's an open studio and not a gallery, I've done things like make 20 and 30 and 40% off tickets to put in a hat. So people,
Oh, fun.
if they decide to buy something, then I'll say, well, if you do decide to buy something, you'll get one of these percentages off. I don't know what it's going to be. It could be 50 or it could be 15,
Nice.
but some of those kind of incentives that it doesn't make you like drive down the value of your work, but it does give you some space to do things that you wouldn't do in a traditional retail space. And it incentivizes people to buy, because if they already know that they're going to get something off, which you would be giving that percentage to whatever space you were doing it in anyway. A gallery would take 50, so anything under 50 is a win. So those are some of the ways that I've kind of tried to incentivize people to kind of pull those triggers as far as buying goes.
Oh, that's so creative.
Let's see, what would I add to that? I would say in selling, to think about, if you have work in a gallery, to make sure that what you're, as Amari was just talking about, to make sure that your pricing is going to work with the gallery. Most galleries do not want you to undercut them. They want to know that if somebody comes to you and it comes to them, that they're going to get this, and that's just if you have representation already. But the other thing, and this maybe relates to what we were talking about earlier, is just to remember it's an open studio. So it's fine to have work in progress and finished work, and for everything to, people actually want that experience of like, what is it like? What does it look like when you're in the midst of the work? And I've even seen artists like working on their work during open studios. So literally, if people are getting like a demo of what you do.
Yeah, could we talk about for a moment, what do you do if you are an extreme introvert and the idea of talking to strangers, the idea of even your friends coming in and talking about your work is so overwhelming. What I want to talk about is the agency that people have, and you do not have to do it a specific way. You don't have to show up in any way that isn't authentic to you. So how have you guys shown up authentically as you in the studio space, or how have you seen other artists do it where you're like, it didn't take away from the experience at all?
I had a colleague who just wanted people to feel like they could wander in her studio and not have to, like, not that she was just standing there waiting for them to talk to her. So she had like a chair she was painting and sanding. And so she just was like off to the side doing that. Like, if you want to talk to me, I'm here. But, she had something that she was doing that was, kind of relaxing for her to do.
That's amazing.
Yeah, and you can also, that's part of the like intention. Like, you don't have to talk to people. Some people just like, there's the work. And you kind of need to, depending on where your open studio is. I always felt like I needed to stay there just for security, but you can swap out with your neighbors and say, can you sit in my studio for a while? And that can be actually amazing, to have your colleague friend talk about your work, and you can talk about their work. And
Yeah.
That's so smart.
you probably know them and know a lot about the work.
Yeah, I think that's great. Yeah, you can almost like represent each other. And
Exactly.
so
Yeah.
yeah, and I think the only thing that I might add is you know, any if you're on this webinar, then it's something that you're considering. But I feel like that's why I'm an artist for a living. Like any of this stuff is optional. Like I don't have to work with galleries. I don't have to show in museums. Like there's none of it that you really have to do. And it could just be that much of it's so much of a like of a not fit that you might decide like, yeah, yeah, like signage will be the only thing that I'm gonna do, and I might just try to blend in and act like I'm one of the people looking at the artwork.
Exactly. That's
Like
really
so.
fun to do.
So
Yeah.
yeah, but yeah, I would never want to feel like I'd never. I always kind of encourage artists to never feel like there's anything that you have to do. You know, it's yeah, it's something that I choose to do because it's easy. It's yeah, I mean, it's relatively easy for me to talk to strangers and to just show my work and to try to sell things, whatever. That's kind of a that comes pretty naturally. But you know, there's other parts of the art world that don't come naturally that I kind of opt out of because I
Mhm.
don't feel good about them. So yeah.
Yeah. And you had a question earlier, Cassidy, about how this kind of connects, Omari, about, your different people are coming in and how do you manage it? Because if your, neighbor wants to talk your ear off or ask you a lot of questions, but you catch out of the corner of your eye, there's a dealer or somebody that you feel like, I want to make sure I honor that person by talking to them. um Omari, you were talking about this. It's like you're actually working as an artist in an open studio, even though it seems like a party. That's kind of part of how you do your job. So I would just look at that neighbor and say, thank you so much for coming. I need to talk to a few other people. Look around,
Yeah,
ask me any questions later, but I need to talk to some other folks, and hopefully they'll get the message.
for sure. Yeah. That like I'll be right back. It's kind of like a yeah, like I think we talked about a bartender who, you know, a bartender can't like serve the same person drinks all night. All right, well I gotta grab that person. If you're still here when I get back, you know, we'll chat some more. But
Yeah.
yeah, that being able to break away is important where everybody's coming to talk to you pretty much. It's like if you're doing an open studio, it's kind of different from a gallery where there's a curator and a gallerist
Right,
and there's
right.
all of these people in between you and the work. But when they come to your studio, like a big part of the allure is, oh man, I'm gonna meet the person that makes this work. Like that's kind of that's a big part of what yeah, what they're looking for.
Yeah. We had talked about in a prior conversation about leaning into your strengths. So Omari was talking about how you worked in a restaurant for a long time. I worked in a gallery for a long time as well. And Nancy mentioned she was graphic design background. So like leaning into your strengths of what do you already naturally kind of gravitate towards, and those can actually really benefit your open studio. So I'm gonna look briefly over the slide just to make sure we covered everything. Creating a budget, that's something that not people think about as well. So if you're gonna have refreshments, if you're gonna have marketing, if you're gonna, print signs, make sure you think about that ahead of time. Also, we talked about a target audience. Who do you want to show up? That's really who you're gonna base the schedule of the open studio around. It's you know, what did you say, Omari, in our first conversation? You're like the open studio, your schedule doesn't have that much
Yes, yeah,
priority.
yeah, you're the lowest on the rung of yeah, what time you like to do it. You kind of want to do it at whatever time the most people that you want to come. It's like
Yeah.
so yeah. So it's like you may not yeah, well, if you're not an evening person, but everybody can come from 4 to 8, then you probably just got to be an evening person that day. So,
Yeah, if you are wanting, people that are probably have full-time jobs in that way, they need to come after work or set up a
sure.
time where it's convenient for them on the weekend. Um, and
I
then
would
also, oh yeah, what are you gonna
I
say?
would also say just, you know, my attitude is we're not as artists required to serve people food and alcohol and
Yeah,
candy and all sorts of things. I feel like we are already very generously sharing with them. Um, and that's our gift. That's the sustenance we're bringing to them. It may be a practical thing, like if you're having an open studio on a hot day, like, yeah, have some water or lemonade or something. But I found in a large building where a lot of artists are showing, if you have something really great, like big bowls of M&Ms, you'll have every kid in the building coming to your studio, which isn't really what it's about. And then there's like this whole kid thing going on. I love kids, but just think about what you're attracting in terms of what you're offering, because your artwork is probably more than enough to be offering people when they come into your studio.
Yeah. Do you want them to remember your snacks or your art?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So that's the planning stage. This is specifically some resources from Artwork Archive to help with the planning stage. So we have free guides, pricing your work consistently for profit, how to plan and promote your studio sale. We have a blog article on that. Also, how to bring the public to your art studio. We have an incredible article covering that. And then just some previous webinars. So if you have an Artwork Archive account and you aren't as familiar with it, we have getting started videos. And then we have previous webinars as well about using reports, how to print artwork labels, where we go in depth with some of these reports that can really benefit you setting up for success for your open studio. And I'll share these slides. So these will all be linked. You can just click on them so you can access them easy. Okay, prepping stage. So between getting your artwork ready, your studio ready, and your mindset ready, here are some of the key things that I felt like were, we all thought these were important that artists should know. So first and foremost, update your artwork images and documentation. Have high resolution photos, have your title, prices, everything ready. Nancy, you had a good point about that. Was it you that were talking about once you sell a work?
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. You might not, you might think, oh, it'd be just so great to sell work. I don't care. But once people wrap it up, you wrap it up for them and they walk off with it, you won't see that again. So if you just have a quick snap from your phone in bad lighting, that's it. And you might think, oh, that doesn't matter, but it does. It really does matter, because for your whole legacy of your career, you're going to want good images all along the way, So when they come to you and say, we want to do a book about your career, we want to get those images of those early works, you're going to want to have nice, probably high resolution images of those works, if it's possible.
And you're going to want to remember where the work went to, who it went to.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
So it's so important. Yeah, sorry, I cut you off. Sometimes Zoom just hop in, but
well, I think we think we're going to remember things, and I've been at it long enough that I've tried a number of different things before Artwork Archive became a thing, and for everything from my own spreadsheets to like folders on my desktop, and it was like it's crazy, 25 years in, you just don't want things every which way. So I'm so grateful. And they are not paying me to say this, but I'm so grateful for Artwork Archive, because I know where everything is and I can just put it in there, and high resolution, low resolution, everything I need.
Do you use it have you prepped for Open Studio with Artwork Archive? Like, what have you done?
I have, yeah. You can print labels. A great thing is that you can, all the work that's on view, you can just print out a portfolio so that people can walk around and look at like, oh, this is all the information about it. Or if someone's really interested in the body of work, just give them a stapled, 10 sheets so they can take that away and look at it and think about it and get in touch with you later.
Yeah, I didn't think about having that for people to take away as well.
People love to take things away from open studios.
Mhm.
Right, Omari?
Absolutely. Yeah.
I mean, that makes me think about, we had a question from someone who emailed in. One, we're talking about pricing. So make sure we already covered, make sure your work is consistently priced. When you're deciding what to sell, if you're going to sell, how do you decide what pieces? How do you decide not to sell I'm trying to think. They were asking specifically around, is it great to have kind of grab and go things that people can walk away with? Is there a right answer? What are your thoughts on that?
I'd love to hear what you'd say, Omari.
Yeah, I mean, I think that kind of goes back to goals. I mean, if your goal is to, to make some money, even if it's just to make your refreshments back and to make half of this month's rent, then sure, you want to have things that range from, I mean, I try to range from like prints that are just open edition, which are $45 a piece, all the way up to original works that are, you know, thousands of dollars a piece. But I want to have enough things that are under $400 that if it's an impulse, people could buy it and take it with them that day. If it's a goal to, you know, to make a profit, you know, to make some kind of money there. So yeah, I think that's kind of an important thing to think about before you start. But I definitely think it's important to hit a number of different price points, because if everything is $4,000 or higher, then it's great if you sell one, but if you don't sell any, then it's nothing. So you can always get some prints made of that, or some t-shirts or some hats, or whatever, however you want to make something that people can take with them and say, I invested in this artist, even if I don't have over $100, but I could put that into something that I really cared about. And then that'll really, I found that really builds for the future. And like, there are people that buy work now that when I met them, they couldn't afford artwork, original artwork. And as their life moved on and they got different jobs and et cetera, then they, you know, they kind of circled back and they bought a print years ago, but then they bought an original 2, 3, 4 years later. So I do think that's a really, really important to have something people can take with them. Part of it is to make some money, but it's also, if they have something of yours, they're likely to come back and get something else of yours at some point.
Mm. Nancy, do you have any
I
follow?
kind of want to echo what Nancy said about pricing too. I'm sorry, I kind
No,
of
go for it.
just with as far as like not undercutting the gallery. I mean, it's just as important to not undercut yourself, because if you've sold original work for any amount of time, if someone comes to your open studio and sees the same size, scale, the same kind of piece for $500 that they spent $1,500 on, then they're not going to feel good about that at all. So you want to be consistent, not just for anybody outside of you, but for the value of your own work and for how artwork should appreciate over time. And I've definitely run into that at open studios where I had a price tag from 2014 behind something, and then it's like $450. It's like, oh, I'm sorry, this is not $450. This is actually $1,500 now, because that was 8 years ago when I priced that. so that's kind of pay attention to as well as you look at selling old work, how you want to keep that a little bit more consistent with your newer work.
Right.
Yeah.
I want to add something here, Cassidy, for anybody who's here who makes work that's not sellable. In my earlier part of my career, I was doing a lot of drawing installations. And so my studio was like a rehearsal space. And what you would see when you came into my studio was not something you could take away, because it was like attached to the wall, or it was hung above your head or something. Um, so there wasn't anything that anyone was literally could even ask me if they could buy, but it was a great opportunity to show curators that came around and gallerists, these are the conceptual ideas I'm working with. And literally they would say, oh, I want to have a conversation with you about what you might do in our gallery or in our museum. So I use the space as a way to kind of show my ideas so that it could lead to other things happen. And it did. So
Yes.
I just wanted to voice that if there's anybody out there who also makes conceptual work or installation work, or say videos, things that people aren't going to just carry out, that open studios can also be a really good place to show aspects of your work.
I'm so glad you brought that up. And it looks like we have a couple people writing in saying, yes, thank you, because they're making work along those lines as well. Here are following the prepping stage. You know, we mentioned having a portfolio page. So here's some examples with, if you have your artwork or have account, ways in which you can use the prepping stage and use your account to help in that way. So we have the schedule feature. So keep track of your dates. When are you needing to send out your marketing materials? Upload your high resolution images, people. You can do up to 30 megabytes in your artwork archive account. So valuable. So you can have them. They're not in various drives everywhere. I also like to make private rooms or collections where you can make these private online viewing rooms of the work you're going to show. And then maybe someone can't attend and you send that in your email follow-up. You can also print QR code labels. So various sizes, artwork labels, QR code labels. And then we have tear sheets, inventory sheets, portfolio pages. There's a lot of ways in which you can prep for an open studio with your account. So be sure to go back and check these out when you get the slides. Okay, so hosting, the actual event is happening. Something that I love to remind people is to just take a moment before it begins, breathe. I can sometimes jump into events instead of reconnecting with my goals. That can set you at ease as well. If you're like, you know what, my goal was to talk to people and to connect and tell them about my practice. That kind of settles yourself because you're not thinking about, I need to do this, I need to do this, I need to do this. You're like, nope, I just want to talk to these people or whatever your goals are. And another thing that I found really valuable was setting up an accessible area for a guest book for capturing emails. I had a lot of people walk through where I didn't necessarily talk to them, but at the end of the day, they write their email and I'm like, this person from this museum showed up. I had no idea. So that's really important. And then I don't know if you guys have specific ones for hosting mantras that you kind of stick to or things when the event's happening, you've noticed, I need to make sure that this is what I keep in mind.
I always foregrounded what is my food going to be throughout the day, because if my blood sugar drops and I'm kind of overwhelmed with the different people coming in, then and also arrange with friends to come and cover for me so that I can just have some bathroom breaks, but also just like psychic breaks. So I'm not, stressed because of that.
Snacks.
Great idea. Yeah. Yeah, I need to work that into just my everyday. It happens all the time where 2 o'clock comes and it's like, well, I've had 4 cups of coffee and I haven't had any food at all. So,
Protein snacks.
so yeah, I think I would echo that. Yeah. Take care of yourself.
Yeah.
And I mean, treating the whole thing like a piece of artwork where, I mean, I kind of got to a point with making work where I was only as good of a painter that day. Yeah. Like I couldn't be any better the day that I was painting than I was that day. And I think it's kind of similar with with events and open studios and gallery shows where you can kind of, working all of the creativity that you would into a piece of work into that event, and also accepting that, I didn't do a QR code a couple years ago because I didn't really know about printing them, or I didn't, like whatever the thing is that you might
Yeah.
uh, basically self-compassion. So whatever you do is enough that day, and kind of moving through it that way.
Yeah, it's an iteration game.
Yeah.
What went well this time? Great. Take notes. Maybe you want to do something different, or maybe you want to not do it next time. I think learning from what you're doing currently and the self-compassion aspect. There was also a point that I wanted to remember to bring up is when you're hosting, stay open the whole time.
Yes, of course.
And
And
Nancy, yeah.
it's just professional. If you've advertised that you'll be there, you just need to be there. Unless you're ill or something, and then you get someone to cover for you. One thing I would say is, our studios are often our sanctuaries, and having all of this energy come in, and they're going to be like opinions and comments, and people are going to buy or not buy or not understand or love it, and it's just a lot of stuff coming at you. So I would say to start before, get there plenty early and spend some time with your work, and just whatever that means to you, just really looking at the work, really being with the work. Like, it's like your child's going off to first grade or something. That's like, I love you, you're awesome. Like, it was a big thing that's about to happen here, but we're gonna be okay, whatever the pep talk is that you want to make for yourself, so that you're kind of like, yeah, I already have a relationship with this work. All these people are going to come in and they're going to have different relationships with work, but the thing that's steady is me and my work.
I love that. It goes back to the agency. You have agency, and this
For
is your
sure.
studio.
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah, I think just one thing to add to this staying till the end is what your attitude is like until the end. Because I've so often sold my biggest piece 5 minutes after something was over. And it's like you can look around and see people like angrily wrapping up their stuff and chunking it into their, 10 minutes before something ends. And if you kind of have the same energy at the end, no matter how well it's gone or how you might perceive it as not going, I think it's really, really likely that something great can happen all the way up until the end, or even a few minutes after. I mean, I've got a really specific example of someone buying the biggest piece of a show that it was an open studio, but I paid to get in the show. Like my investment was already kind of big. It was out of town, and yeah, someone bought the biggest piece as I was wrapping up
Nice.
everything else from the show. And it wasn't even a person that was there in person. They were on, it was kind of it was an actor who was on FaceTime with their assistant, and that's the
Wow.
person that bought it. So yeah, I just think like whatever your attitude is, trying to keep that yeah, it's like a shooter. You miss 10 shots, but you might hit the game winning shot if you have the same energy at the end of the fourth quarter, so
That's
that's,
great.
yeah.
I would agree with Amaria many times, especially curators and gallerists will come at the end because they don't want to have to chit chat with everybody. So they kind of like sneak in the last half hour. And if you're like, oh, it's almost over, I'll go chat with my friends, you might really miss
Yeah.
the moment. The other thing I wanted to say about hosting is, um, all these different people are going to come into your studio and you just don't know what they're going to bring or what their questions are going to be. And just to kind of encourage people to have fun with it. I had a woman come into my studio. I was doing the installation work and she was like, is that art? And it was just like some cardboard I had rolled up in a sling to get it off the floor for open studios. And, my first reaction was to be like, no, that's my art's over there. And then I just was like shifting. I was like, I don't know. What do you think? Is it art? She goes, well, could I take a picture of it? And I'm like, sure. So just to like open up this space of like, we're all explorers here. Like we're all in this, we all love art, whether we're the artists or the visitors, and we're just in this conversation about what's going on here.
Yeah. That's so I love the idea of someone um coming in and saying, "Is that art?" I feel like I've had that thought a lot of the time too. And to have that playful energy just breaks the ice. It also gives them an experience like you're talking about that they'll remember and they'll have this connecting point with you. I love that. We're gonna move on because I know we're getting up close to our time. Hosting. So these are some resources with Artwork Archive. Have your account. It's cloud-based, so you can log into it on your phone. If you're having contact records or you're meeting people and you want to take notes about the people you're meeting, remind yourself to follow up with them. You can create a contact record, save those notes. You can send digital invoices immediately for people where they can pay for that invoice right from their phone as well. You can make sure to take photos or have someone else take photos so that if you follow up with an email, you can do it on a news post on a public profile, or you can also, send that in your follow-up email of maybe kind of like FOMO, like, look how much fun it was. But I love being able to kind of do a post event experience or in the middle of the open studio using our work archive, but also post event, which is what we're going to talk about now. So the event is over. You're following up, you're, decompressing. First and foremost, when you get back in your space, you're going to want to clean it up in whatever way that means. So food, trash, and then physically too, this was a point that Nancy actually introduced me to, which was clearing the energy of your space. So what would you say that means? How have you done that, Nancy, in the past?
You know, It's an intangible thing, but having all these people come through and say things about your work, or worse yet, walk in and walk out, you know, with this sort of disregard or whatever. It's all kind of the residue of that is there. So whatever rituals you have, whatever is a reset for you, whether it's like music or smells or opening all the windows or whatever it is that allows you to feel like I'm reclaiming this space now, it's my private sanctuary again. I think it's important.
Yeah, Omari, I also want to ask you with your follow-ups because Omari and I have been friends for a while. We were in the Nashville art community, and one of the things I love about Omari is he's so great at following up. And so could you kind of talk about your strategy, or how did you get great at following up? What success have you found in
Yeah,
various ways?
I mean, I think I just found that the people that I invite are more likely to come. You know, it's like I've done gallery shows where the gallery did all the promotion and there are 8 people there, and I've done shows where it was me doing all the promotion and there was 200 people there. And so I think it was just that kind of, just yeah, that tangible reality in it. And I think anyone can find out how it's good for them to do. Whether some people it is sending text to people in their phones. I mean, for me, it was definitely an email list and just starting an email list as early as possible, keeping it in a Google Drive or however you need to keep it, or artwork archive, keeping it in an artwork archive, but however you need to do it, but keeping up with these are the people that have bought work and that have supported the work before, and then being as authentic with the relationships as you can, where it's like, Cassidy and I met in a professional setting, but are truly friends. And so I think part of it is, that balance that of sure, we all have our goals in meeting people and having people show up, but also, kind of truly being invested in whatever community you're in without needing to get something back from it has been really helpful.
Mm.
And then in the follow-up too, after an open studio, when you're do you send an email and say, these are the pieces that are still available, or what, or is it no, if you didn't come, that's kind of it. Maybe it's both. And do both of you view the follow-up as a continuation of the open studio? Or is it more of this happened, come to the next one?
I think that when people come to your open studio, it's an acknowledgement. They've acknowledged you, like I'm here, you're an artist. I'm gonna spend some of my life energy here looking at your work. And especially if they've made an overture, like Omari said, if they have your QR code and they get in touch with you, or if they've filled out your guest book, or even if they've just, you caught their name, to just send them a message and say thank you. Like
Mm.
even that is just like a connection. And then if you do, say, for example, have that portfolio, artwork archive portfolio of all the work that you showed, why not attach it as a PDF and say, just as a reminder, here's my work. And, if you're interested in it, or if you know anyone who is, you could pass it on to them. So that PDF can become like a really nice object for sharing your work.
That's because you are also respecting them as well. And these are the pieces you saw, and maybe they thought about something else and sent you an email afterwards again, or maybe they replied to the email and say, you know what, I was thinking about this piece and I didn't get to ask you during the event.
Please let me know if you have questions. And also, if you're in a building, like I was, just be respectful that they've probably seen like 25, 30, maybe 40 or more artists in a day. They might appreciate you reminding them that, remember we had a conversation, here's my work.
Yeah, that's so true. You could say, I have often, especially going through a museum, you see a piece and you're like, I love that piece. But then you saw a bunch of museums that day on a trip and you're like, I don't remember where I saw it, but I remember what it looked like.
Yeah,
So to jog
absolutely.
these memories.
Yeah, it's like whatever you like. I mean, I like shoes personally, and if I click on a pair of shoes, if I think about how many times, the Nike app or whatever shows me that same pair of shoes before I buy them, it's usually a lot of times. And so it's kind of a similar thing where it's like somebody, and that's way less expensive. So I mean, if you say it's a $1,500 piece of artwork, it's helpful to get it in front of a person a number of times. And I think the first thing is 100% is, like Nancy said, is just thank you. I mean, people that are taking their time to kind of acknowledge that thing. And I mean, an open studio, I mean, a studio can be a very lonely place. It's like we spend, you know, a lot of our lives in this very kind of internal world. And so when people kind of come in and acknowledge it, there's a lot of energy that they give you with that. And I also think that, yeah, that reminding them of the thing that they liked, that it may not be an impulse, but they might see it at just the right time. You know, tax return might come and they might say, you know what, that's what I'm going to do with some of this money. I'm gonna buy that piece of artwork that I've been thinking about for sometimes a year and a half. I mean, there's pieces that I bought personally that I thought about for 2 years and then went back to the artist and said, now I'm ready. And so yeah.
Yeah. And
So
giving them
get in
that,
front of them again. And I also think if you've done so much work. So I always feel like if you've done 95% of the work, like do the last 5, you know, that
Yeah,
whatever that
that's really
number is,
critical.
it's like you've already done a bunch of work. So the easy part is just kind of finish, and that after is that song that's kind of finishing it.
that is so true. Okay, so I want to acknowledge that we're at 3:01. This webinar is supposed to be an hour. If you guys are okay, if you have a few more minutes, I'd love to stay on a little longer. Anyone else who is joining us, if you have a few minutes as well, just so that if there are some questions, we can tackle those at the very end. Again, we're going to send these slides. So I do have a few post-event resources from Artwork Archive. We talked about the contact records, creating contact groups of who attended, sending portfolio pages as a PDF or digitally. And then also expenses. You can keep track of your invoices, your expenses, everything you spent on framing, on setting it up, or if you had marketing, all of the stuff related to your open studio, you can keep track of that in your account as well. So don't forget to do that as a follow-up. And then lastly, so before we hop into the Q&A, I just want to point out that we've got a ton of resources. So we publish a weekly newsletter with art calls, industry tips, artist interviews. We also share articles on our blog from experts around the world. You can access these resources for free within your Artwork Archive account, also for free on our website, artworkarchive.com. And then also, if you're interested in trying out an inventory platform, we offer a free 14-day trial, no credit card required. This allows you to really experience Artwork Archive, see if it benefits your art practice, no strings attached. So reach out if you have any questions, because we really love hearing from you, and we're always here to help. I'm going to include a link if you want to visit or start a free trial. And then now I want to get to a Q&A. So I'm going to look through some questions. Katie or Alessandra,
I have a question I saw that popped up. Can I answer it?
Please, yes.
So somebody asked something about my artwork is large and the wall in my studio isn't ideal, and how can I show the work? And I think it's great. I'm sorry I didn't catch the name of this person, but I think it's great that you're really like looking at the work and saying what would be best for the work, because that's a really great place to start. Like, hey, painting, where do you want to be? What would be ideal? And then to think, maybe it doesn't fit in this studio. Maybe one of my neighbor's studios has a better wall, and work something out with them. Or maybe there's like in the lobby of the building of the studios, there's a big space where so really just think like there are lots of places in the world that you could show this work. It could be at the coffee shop next to the studio building. So think about sort of what does the work need and how can I best show it? And that's kind of a cool thing. If someone comes to your studio and says, is this all of your work? And you say, oh no, I've got another piece in the lobby or at the coffee shop or wherever. So if they're interested in your work, they'll track it down.
That is such a good point. I also am reading through these questions and I'm like, man, there are so many things that we could talk about. I wanted to say, so I've seen this a couple times. One that keeps coming up is if you have a studio in your home and you are hesitant to invite strangers, or there's limited parking, how do I put my address out there? Do either of you have tips around inviting people into your home, or have you, seen it done successfully, or what would you say to answer that question?
Yeah, I mean, I think my most successful open studio was in my home studio, and I think that I did not share my address. I only shared it with RSVPs, and when people RSVP'd, I did find out like who they were before I sent the address. So it's like if I didn't know them, I might ask, "Oh, how'd you find out about this open studio? How do we have a common someone? Like, what's the?" And so I think in some ways it can limit a little bit, but for the most part, if it's going to be an in-person open studio, no matter where you live, someone will be able to say how they know you, and I wouldn't give the address unless they can kind of have, at least personally, unless they can sort of come up with some of that stuff. And I think it's also good to maybe have, if you live by yourself, to have someone there with you. I mean, me doing an open studio and Nancy doing an open studio, or two different things. I'm a 6'8" plus, I'm a large man, and so I can physically, like, I have been a bouncer before. I can remove somebody from a space. And not that Nancy couldn't, but I think you do have to be aware of if whether you're, I think you have to be kind of aware of how physically letting someone in the place where you sleep. And so yeah, I think it is having somebody else there with you, and being a little bit more conscious of who gets the address and how they even found out that this was going on is important.
Hmm.
I'd also say, even if you're in a building, it's a really good idea to have somebody with you for open studios. Numerous times I've had people come in, they're drinking too much of other artists' wine, and they come into my studio, and it can be a situation where it's just weird or awkward, or they're literally maybe going to damage something. So it's always good to have another person, not to scare people, but I wanted to answer. Is it okay if I see a
Yes.
question here?
Yes.
Mar Clausen asks, how do you get gallery owners and important members of museums to your open studio? One really good way is, especially if you're in some kind of a collective with other artists or in a building, is to get everybody to send them an invitation. And if you have a collective invitation that's for the building, it's got everybody's name on it, then if they get like 8 or 10 of those, they're starting to get the message that they better go. A revelation I had was one time, really important curator ended up coming to my studio, and I was, kind of like, oh, this is so nice of you to come. And he said, no, actually, this is my job. I am out like almost every day of the year here in this city, like because it's my job to know what's going on out in the art community. So I think that's a perspective I like to share with artists, that you're doing them a favor of letting them know about you as a strong artist that they need to know about in their community. So
You're so right. I think we can be in the mindset of, please come, but
Please
that's
pick me.
yeah, that's
No,
not the
we're the
case.
ones, we're the artists, we're the ones who drive the whole thing, right, everybody? Like,
it.
there would be no art world if we weren't going in our studios every day and making the work and showing it, right? Curators wouldn't have anything to do, dealers wouldn't have any work to sell. So yeah, we're the
I'm
jam.
looking, is there an ideal time for an open house? That is a quick one. What would you say?
I think depending on the day of the week, if it's a Saturday or Sunday, I try to do like afternoons, maybe that 11 to 3 on Saturday. If it's any weekday, including Friday, I try to go after 5. So 5 to 8 or 6 to 9. Most people are going to be getting off of work and school or whatever. And yeah, I usually cut them off by 9. I think that's also, if there's enough free drinks, then 9 is a pretty good time for people to, all right, let's head on to the bar now, because this is Yeah, that's so yeah, but those are the times that I usually go for, like similar to art openings. And another thing that I just would add to meeting gallerists, curators, is to go to their shows. It's like
Yes.
the reason I knew Cassidy was because I went to so many arts company shows, and I mean, I've met, I've only worked with 3% of the gallerists that I know, but because I know all of them, when I do something, they're more likely to say, hey, yeah, I know Omari's work. He's doing this thing that's cool. Even if they're not showing me in their gallery, that's it's kind of that sort of working relationship. So yeah, go to as much of their stuff as you can, and they're gonna get to know you. It's like, yeah, we always know those people that are like, man, they're at every single show, it seems like. So yeah.
Such a good point, Omari. Yeah.
Yeah.
And part of that is not even just to promote your work, but to really honestly and truly be part of the larger community and support those other artists, support the gallery. The gallery needs
Sure.
people in the room. So you're helping them, and then they're likely to pay more attention to. I did early on when I was doing installations in the gallery, people would come in and they'd be like, can I drop off my slides? And I just wanted to say, don't do that. That was back when we had slides, but like show up to the opening and get to know people rather than just, like, here, can you help me?
Sure.
Like support them first. Great point, Omari.
One more that I saw that kind of comes up often is this idea of selling work at various price points, new, old work. Someone even said that they had prints that were created from like a moo.com. They look good, they're not too expensive, but I feel weird about having original art and product to sell at the same time. So how do you navigate? There's so much that you could sell and show. Would you curate a room in different ways, or it kind of goes back, I guess, to the goals of what's your goal? And you can have various types of open studios. Maybe there's one where you only sell a certain type, or maybe there's, what do you guys think?
You can go first, Nancy. Yeah.
I saw a lot of different strategies at actually in the United States, the big gallery building I was in there were a number of artists who would like quickly try to make a lot of little things for people to buy. And I don't know how successful that was. I thought it could possibly distract from seeing the actual work to have too many reproductions or even like small works. The studio building I was in England, it's a very different world there. They're not as capitalistic as we are. And so people were much more interested in the conversation and showing the work and, having the open studios be more around that and having a lot of like community activities in relation to the open studios. So engagement was one-on-one with the artist, but then also there were like these different events that you could go to in the building. So they also have a government that subsidizes their studios. So, artists can afford to do that more.
Yeah. Yeah. And I would say whatever's like, if it's authentic, then go for it. I love a merch table. I love to have like a little table that has prints that I might have, gotten over the years but haven't sold yet or whatever. But I think it's okay to have that. Maybe it might be outside of the studio door, like right outside the door when people walk in or leave, or kind of in some way having it where it's not competing with the original work. But if you've made it and you've made it authentically, also studies. I make a lot of studies, so I do a lot of 8x10-inch paintings that I sell, but I'm selling them after I'm making them kind of authentically. It's not like I'm trying to make things because this is in the price point of what I can sell, because I've seen that happen, and it typically doesn't. If you're making work with the buyer in mind first, that's probably not going to work out well. I've seen it done all kinds of ways, where somebody lives in Wisconsin, so they paint a bunch of Green Bay Packers stuff, and it's like they're not, or they're here, so they paint this UT stuff, and I'm in Tennessee, so University of Tennessee stuff, and it's like, yeah, it's the amount of time that it takes away from your authentic practice. is probably not worth the 1 in 5 of those little kind of knickknacks that you might sell. No, no offense if you're making knickknacks out there.
Yeah.
But I just found, and I'm finding that from my own experience of trying to paint stuff for shows, because I'm like, there are no black people in this area, so I need to paint some more people that are white, or I need to paint more stuff that's gonna. It's like it just never it never works out, and I'm saying that from my own experience, not kind of as a knock to what anyone else has tried to do or is doing.
Yeah. I mean, ultimately, what I keep hearing and what I feel like we keep coming back to is this agency. I mean, if you're showing up authentically, if you know your own work, you know how you want to show up, how you want to talk about your work, that's kind of the most important stuff to think about beforehand. So then you're not showing up in this kind of insecure energy of what do they want? What do people want to
Yeah,
see? How do they are they going to sell all of this?
Right.
It's you're standing grounded in who you are and proud of your work, proud of what you've created, and also understanding that it's a gift to offer to people to be able to step into your space. So I know that we have so many more questions and I'm so sorry. I want to respect everyone's time. So I'll share this recording and then we'll look through the questions afterwards as well and be able
Can I
to.
answer just one more?
Yes, yes, yeah, of course. If you want to,
Because
yes.
I'm not sure we've represented the artists who aren't in an urban area and have, have access to lots and lots of people easily.
Yes.
Chantal asked, she said, I live in this beautiful rural location, but how do I get people out to see my work, especially like curators and gallerists? And this is sort of for everyone, is to just think of it as a long game of building relationships. And as Omari said, go to those galleries, go to those, whatever it is, university or museum shows, write to those people and say, hey, I saw the show you did on Louise Bourgeois. Was so important to me in my practice in this specific way. So you slowly are building those relationships. So even if you're out not right in the center, they start to know who you are and they know that you care. And then I think we touched on this, that you can find somebody who has an open studios in the city and just ask them. I think Omari, you mentioned this, that you can use part of their wall, their studio, to hang even one work, and then just be there and support your friend in their open studios, so that you start to get exposure. People start to get exposed to your actual work, and then gradually the fire is gonna light, and they're gonna be like, I will make that 20-minute drive to go see your work, because I can see you've got a body that might be good for me to put in this show or whatever. So just like let it build up over time, and also meet them where they are first.
for sure.
I love that. Thanks for addressing that, because there are a lot of artists out there who, are in the studio way far away from any kind of central place or building. And again, too, there are options for virtual open studios as well, where you can host kind of a live event, maybe on Zoom, and you're sitting there or you're showing pieces. And that's something that can be really creative. And what a gift to also invite those who also live in rural areas that want to go see
Yes,
art
that's
but
a
can't
great
get into the
idea.
city.
That's a
Yeah,
great idea for a virtual open studios for all these people in far-flung places. Yeah.
And it's more accessible. It opens up too to folks who might not be able to access a building or access the space, because there's a lot of people showing up in all these different ways. So before we close out, I just wanted to ask, I'm going to stop sharing my screen, but I just wanted to see if you guys had any kind of closing thoughts or things that you think are really important that we missed. If not, that's okay too.
I'm just very touched by all of the people who came, and I feel honored to be part of this kind of mini community that we just created here in this webinar, and that we're all showing up and making the work and trying to figure out how can we give it to the world, basically. That's really the gesture, is like, here, I made this thing for you. Yeah, you made the work with so much heart and authenticity, and just as you turn to offer to the world, bring that same heart and authenticity, and it'll go well.
For sure. Yeah, I would echo the same thing. I think this was a great time for us to connect with each other, and just one kind of other point or idea about people that are in sort of far off areas is definitely connect with other artists. I mean, some of the most some of the biggest opportunities that I've gotten have come from artists who I would have thought, oh man, they're not gonna pay any attention to my work because look at what they're doing. And then you meet them, or they happen to see it, or you go to one of their shows and they might kind of usher you into an opportunity that you weren't expecting. So yeah, let's be sure to to keep up with each other, and yeah, I think some of the people that really kind of almost decide who's next or whatever are other artists that are already doing, kind of doing whatever they're doing out there in the world. So yeah, I think that's a great way to kind of get kind of smaller, rural kind of communities that are outside of the big cities. Yeah, we're gonna find each other, and that's gonna help, the gallerists and the museums, et cetera. That's gonna help them find us. So yeah.
You are so right. It's so much word of mouth, and also people in the arts tend to create art and also work in the arts. And so you have no idea. Careers are long, friendships, relationships are long. So creating those interconnections with other artists have been absolutely integral in my life and my practice, and all of that. So that's a wrap on our Open Studio webinar. Thank you all so much for
you
joining
all.
us, for your insightful questions. I hope that the tips we covered have prepared you to successfully plan or host, or even just get your mind thinking about what might be some future goals to set. Don't forget to check out the Artwork Archive resources if you need any additional guidance. Again, thank you for your time. We'll send out a recording and a follow-up email. Have a great rest of your day. And if you do host an open studio, tag us or send us a photo afterwards,
Yeah, let
letting
us
us
know.
know how it went.
Yeah.
Yes. Great. Well, bye everyone. Hope you have a really great day. Thank you,
Bye,
Nancy. Thank you,
everyone.
Amari.
Thank
Thank
you.
you, Cassidy.
Bye.